Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a great pleasure to be back in the House representing the good people of Aurora, Oak Ridges, and Richmond Hill. After a long summer away, I confess I'm a little bit, I have mixed feelings about that. I'm happy to be back, but at the same time, this is the 22nd day this year that we're sitting in this House, Madam Speaker. I think Canadians would have expected us to work through the summer rather than be home, even though it's always a pleasure to engage with our constituents. We are elected to do a job for Canadians, and it would have been so much better had we been here in this House, or at least committees working through the summer, but the Liberals, of course, felt otherwise. But while I enjoyed my time in my riding this summer, Madam Speaker, I was disheartened to have constantly heard from so many people in our community that they feel unsafe. After 10 years of this very tired Liberal government, people, they don't feel comfortable walking to school. They're unsafe taking public transit. They don't feel safe in their own homes. And this is due to a wave of violent crime that has swept through certainly communities throughout our country, and particularly in urban areas like the one that I represent in Aurora, Oak Ridges, and Richmond Hill. Due to the Liberal government's catch and release policies, repeat offenders continue to be released back in the communities, where they can terrorize the communities again and perpetrate even more crimes, in many cases similar and same crimes as the ones they had been arrested for. Since the Liberals took office, the soft on crime policies have caused crime rates to skyrocket, Madam Speaker. Violent crime is up 50%. Homicides are up 28%. Extortion up a staggering 350%. Auto thefts up 46%. Human trafficking, 84%. But worst of all, total sexual violations against children up 119%, Madam Speaker. We cannot forget, Madam Speaker, that behind each of these statistics are real people who have suffered and are continuing to suffer, who are frightened and continue to be frightened. Two people, one, an 11-year-old girl, lost her life, killed as a result of an arson, a deliberate arson, to the place they should feel safest, in their own home. This was in my community that I live in Richmond Hill. A man in Vaughan, as we heard yesterday in the House, from my very learned and exceptional colleague from King Vaughan, was killed during a home invasion. Criminal walked in, this thug put a gun to his daughter's head. Naturally, a father would react, and upon reacting to protect his little girl, he was shot dead in front of his families, leaving the children to grow without their father. In Niagara, and this is very sickening, Daniel Senecal was charged with a break-in and enter, aggravated assault, and sexual interference of a 3-year-old girl, Madam Speaker. The child suffered serious injuries and had to be rushed to an out-of-region hospital for advanced care. Senecal also requested to be transferred to a women's prison. The Justice Minister tweeted just a few weeks ago, "This isn't the Wild West." My constituents have told me that they feel it is far worse than the Wild West. But it certainly feels like it, because these criminals are free to re-offend at will. They get caught one day, and police services across the country are telling us they are frustrated because they are released the next day. The minister, like this Liberal government, is once again out of touch with the everyday struggles facing my constituents and indeed all Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Bill C-2 fails to bring bail reform that will end catch and release policies. It fails to implement mandatory prison sentences for fentanyl traffickers who kill thousands. In fact, more people have died from opioid and fentanyl overdoses in this country than were killed in the Second World War. A staggering statistic, Madam Speaker. It fails to bring new mandatory prison time for gangsters who commit crimes with guns and wreak havoc on our streets. And they are rampant and everywhere. It fails to eliminate house arrest for some of the most serious offenses, allowing those who brutalize our communities to serve their sentences from the comfort of their own home. I am deeply concerned, Madam Speaker, that this bill does not go far enough to fight crime and bring safety back to our communities. The bill allows for new powers, powers such as opening mail without oversight, just on suspicion, compelling internet companies to hand over private information, warrantless searches, and limiting the use of cash. That doesn't make sense. Cash has been legal tender in Canada since the inception of cash in the country, and in many communities, as we heard from the previous speaker, in the north, in seniors and so forth, they don't have the credit card system. They don't have some of them don't have internet to be able to transact their business online. Cash is very important. This limits the use of cash, this bill. The bill raises serious concerns about the privacy, surveillance, and civil liberties. I would argue, as with many Canadians, Madam Speaker, that judicial oversight, parliamentary oversight, they're fundamental principles of our democracy, and they need to be there. We cannot give arbitrary powers without having the proper oversight to ensure that, that there is fairness in the system. The bill would expand lawful access powers, allowing police, security agencies, and others to demand information from various service providers, including hotels, banks, doctors, and more, to release private information without judicial authorization. That's a direct infringement on the privacy of Canadians. The bill has a low threshold that could compel providers to provide subscriber information, account details, in many instances, timestamps, location of service, and other normally considered private information. Bill C-2 gives the Minister and/or Cabinet new powers to act unilaterally without parliamentary or judicial oversight, just on suspicion. Nebulous criteria and vagueness leaves room for interpretation, Madam Speaker. It leaves room for arbitrary decisions and possible discriminatory decision-making. We have checks and balances in our democracy. This bill takes away a lot of those checks and balances. Conservatives have always fought for practical policies to secure our borders and bring back safety to our communities while upholding Canadian rights. Madam Speaker, it's not surprising that this tired Liberal government is bringing in a bill called the Strong Borders Act. What is surprising is that they've been in power for 10 years. 10 years later, they've now decided, hey, we should have stronger borders. Let's put in a bill. You would think that this would have been a priority from day one, but now somehow they want us to believe that these sweeping powers, this new bill, is going to fix the problem. We should listen to them because they know what needs to be done. In fact, a lot of the things that are in this bill that are supportable are things that we as Conservatives have been talking about in this House every day over the past 10 years to ears that have not been listening on the other side of the House, the Liberal tired government. Conservatives support adding thousands of border agents, extending CBSA powers along the entire border, and installing border surveillance towers. We also support installing high-powered scanners at land crossing and shipping ports to spot drugs, guns, and stolen cars. Most importantly, we will always support the hardworking men and women on the front lines doing their very best with the limited resources they are given. They play a critical role in keeping Canadians safe by working to stop the flow of drugs and guns in our country, and for that, we should sincerely be very gracious and thank them. Madam Speaker, Conservatives also support the government tracking departures so government officials know which deportees are in Canada illegally. Over the last 10 years, the Liberal government has broken our once proud immigration system and turned it into something very hollow. Thousands of immigrants entering into an already overburdened system have resulted in the worsening of housing, jobs, and so forth. So as I wind down, I have lots more I could say, Madam Speaker. I will say this. Only Conservatives will protect your freedoms and fight for a tough-on-crime approach so that you can live in your home feel safe, walk in your community, take your children to school, go to a theater, and enjoy a nice, peaceful, safe life. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Madam Speaker, there's some contradiction within the member's statements. On the one hand, he wants the government to take actions in regards to fentanyl. Yet at the end of the day, a drug dealer can put fentanyl into an envelope, a normal envelope, and bring it to Canada Post. And this legislation, through a warrant, would then allow that envelope to actually be opened. I would think that that is a positive thing, that the member would be supporting something of that nature, given he wants more action done on the issue of fentanyl. The good news is he spent the first part of his speech talking about the issue of bail. This Prime Minister has made a commitment, a platform commitment going back from the election, the most democratic aspect to what takes place in between us sitting, and we made a commitment to bring in bail reform. Good news is we're going to be seeing that bail reform this fall. And I'm wondering if he will be inclined to support in a cooperative way, much like Conservative voters want, to see more cooperation on the floor of the House of Commons.
The Honourable Member for Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Madam Speaker, I thank the member from Winnipeg North for his question. Here's what I'm inclined. I'm inclined to believe that they're not going to do anything that they said they're going to do, because this Prime Minister has been there for the last 6 months. In the 6 months, he's made a bunch of promises, none of which have been fulfilled. It was this Prime Minister and these Liberals have decided to prorogue Parliament, to not come back for the summer, to not allow committees to work, and in many cases, committees are not even working this week, the first week back, Madam Speaker. I don't trust what they say.
To the Shepherd.
The Honourable Member for Shefford. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. Now, he spoke about border security. Around 10 years ago, I remember when I was a staffer that Conservatives were cutting funding for border security, and that had an impact. Now, my question. I spent a lot of time on the ground this summer. People are concerned, yes, about safety, but they're also concerned about the cost of living. This federal regime, whether the Liberals or the Conservatives, like to centralize. They create programs that are not suited to rural communities. Like in my riding with Shefford and Granby, it just doesn't help for communities like my own.
This is Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the member for her question. I was here 10 years ago. I was part of the Conservative government. We had an immigration system that was the envy of the world, Madam Speaker. We had an immigration system that worked, that responded to newcomers coming to the country, that provided outcomes for them, and the best possibility for positive outcomes for them and their families, while at the same time contributing to the Canadian economy. Unfortunately, this Liberal government forewent a lot of the strategies and the policies and the controls that we had in place, such as, for example, vetting of new people coming to the country. They relaxed those. That has created a tremendous amount of problems that we see with respect to crime in our communities, including the community in which the honourable member who asked the question is from.
Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson-Nicola.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's always a pleasure to rise on behalf of the people from Kamloops, Thompson-Nicola, and I want to build on the intervention from my colleague from Winnipeg North. He talked about a warrant being required. I'm going to just read this section. The corporation may open, and this is an amendment to 41 of the Canada Post Corporation Act. The corporation may open any mail if it has reasonable grounds to suspect that. Now, I don't see a warrant requirement in there. I've read the charter statement, which says a warrant is required. I don't see a warrant requirement there. Perhaps in the amendments to section 40.1, that provision, but I don't read it there. Does the member agree that it doesn't seem to be present there? And if anybody's watching and they know this, please contact me, because I'd love to see why it doesn't say a warrant is required, but the government is saying that a warrant is required, because perhaps I'm missing something. Thank you.
Member for Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Madam Speaker, I appreciate the question and the point that my learned colleague has made. Certainly, it is not part of the legislation. The warrant requirement is not there, and I happen to believe, as many Canadians believe, that we should not leave the opening of our mail at the discretion of the mailman who has the piece before him, Madam Speaker.